So there are two kinds of stories. There's a story you tell, and there's a story you weave. And I'm going to take those in that order because most people understand the first one. They know what it is. They don't understand how to do it. But very few people even know about the second one, which is the story you weave. So we're going to come to that because it's actually more important. Let's start with the story you tell. Story you tell is a literal story that you actually tell in a conversation. And there are tons of frameworks for story. There's dozens and dozens of frameworks. They can get super nuanced and complicated, but let's just start with the most basic, the most important, which is a 3-act structure. If you only learn this, your storytelling will get 90%. You'll be better than 90% of all storytellers if you only learn this. And this is going to sound so easy, and it's because it's so easy that nobody does it.
Welcome to the Sales Problem Podcast. Here is the problem we are trying to solve. Every year you hit the reset button and you have to beat your numbers and grow your business. You have to get quicker, faster, and better. We are two guys trying to solve that sales problem, trying to help you grow by enhancing what you know about the art and science of selling and personal development. Along the way, we're going to interview some interesting characters and debate some different angles about this common business problem. So thanks for joining us. Let's get growing. Welcome back, listeners, to the Sales Problem Podcast. This is episode number 8, and it's on human connection. I'm your host, Daniel Burns, and joining me is my co-host, the Sultan of Speak, the curator of finely tuned communication, the smooth talking, Steve Comerford. Steve, how you doing?
Wow, Dan, you impress me every time. But I feel this is a magical time today, you and I spending it together, right? I hope you don't have any tricks up your sleeve. But hey, it's a beautiful day. Good
I've
to
always
be here
got
again,
some tricks.
and really looking forward to our talk today.
There's a lot of magic in the air, as always, Steve. And we are talking about the sales problem, so let's start talking answers. We are the Great Canadian Growth Guys, as everybody knows, and today we have an amazing guest, Brian Miller. This is going to be one that all of you listeners want to share. He's from Clarity Consulting, and what you're going to learn today is how to say the damn thing, how to just spit it out and get it right. That's right. Communication, it is so simple, but sometimes we just make it so complicated. And salespeople, every salesperson that I've worked with and myself, we're all guilty of the same thing, which is just over communicating and talking too much. So if you've ever been in a situation where you've given a long-winded answer to a very short question, or you found yourself sitting there thinking, I am just not explaining this correctly. I'm overcomplicating things. I don't even get what I'm saying. Well, you need this episode, and you need to share it with somebody who you know does the exact same thing. So Brian Miller is a master of human connection. And guess what it is that we really do at the heart of sales? We connect with other humans. More specifically, we connect our ideas so that other humans get moved and they end up buying what we're selling. So today, Brian Miller is going to talk to us about how to effectively connect with our voices so that it feels like magic to our clients. Okay, that's not a pun. Steve's intro about tricks is not just a pun, because Brian Miller is actually a legit magician. And he has a TED Talk that, get this, it has more than 3.5 million views. That's a lot of people listening to what Brian has said. And his talk is on how to magically connect with anyone. But Brian also runs his own consulting company, so he's very well versed in business. And he's also the author of 3 New People: Make the most of your daily interactions and stop missing amazing opportunities. That's what salespeople want, is to connect and to take advantage of all the amazing opportunities. So let's jump straight into the hot seat. Let's get Brian on the mic. Brian, tell us some of the amazing things that I missed in this introduction, and tell me about how you're feeling being on the Sales Problem Podcast.
Hey, Daniel, Steve, thanks so much for having me. Such a lovely intro. I'm excited. I'm feeling excited. I just want to dive in. So many salespeople are not making the impact they want because they're focused on all the wrong things. So let's talk about it. Where do you want to start?
Awesome. Well, let's jump in, and I want to try something new, Brian. On this episode, let's forget about all the things that are nice to know about communication. Let's take out a laser pointer and just zoom in right away on the number one thing that you could say to salespeople listening that's important about communication, that they can only learn from somebody like yourself that has your background, that studies this and goes deep.
Yeah. So what could you learn about sales and communication only from somebody who used to be a magician? So it's a great question. Here's the answer. We connect with people not in spite of their differences, but because of them. So I'll say that again because that's tricky for people the first time they hear it. We connect with people not in spite of their differences, but because of them. So when you're a magician, the hardest audience you could possibly have is another magician, right? Because she knows all the same things I do. She knows all the tricks. She knows all the secrets. And so if I try to create magic for another magician, I'm not going to get very far. It's going to be very difficult. In fact, it's non-magicians that I have the highest opportunity to create magic for because they don't know what I know. They have a completely different perspective, a completely different worldview. I don't know what they know. They don't know what I know. And because of that, there's an opportunity for us to create something extraordinary in the middle where everybody leaves uplifted, transformed for the better. So we connect with people not in spite of their differences, but because of them. And this is the really important thing. People don't know what you know. They don't believe what you believe. They don't want what you want. This is something that one of my heroes and mentors, Seth Godin, taught me years ago. This is a really important concept. People don't know what you know. They don't want what you want. They don't believe what you believe. If they did, you'd be the same person, right? What you know isn't true. But a lot of times in sales and in conversations in general, we talk as if people want the same thing that we want, know what we know, and believe what we believe. So the first step to truly connecting with people is admitting you don't share a perspective, and your job is to understand theirs before anything else.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And I totally agree with what you're saying. We talk a lot on this podcast about perspective and the lens in which we view the world. And as salespeople, us shifting to try to see through the eyes of the client, to try to see from their perspective and bring them the solutions that are to their problems, not the ones we think they have, but to their problems. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah. The problems that, not even the problems, but I usually phrase it as this. Don't sell people what you think they need. Sell them what they know they want. And that is the problem of knowledge, right? There's a word for it. It's the problem, a phrase for it. It's the problem of knowledge, which is the more you know about something, the harder it is to explain to an outsider, which is exactly what you were talking about in your intro. I deal with this when I work with engineers and people in tech constantly. I consult for companies where their engineering department, they're brilliant. They're geniuses. And then the salespeople go out and sell stuff and come back and the engineers go, what the hell? That's not our product. We don't make that. That's not even possible. What did you sell? And then the salespeople in the engineering department get into a big fight and nobody knows what to do. And it's because the engineers know so much about what they do that they don't know how to explain it to an outsider, someone in sales who's not an engineer. And the salespeople think, well, I'm just going to go sell whatever people are going to say yes to because my job is transactional, right? Get people to say yes. And so there's two problems happening simultaneously. The engineers are bad at communicating what the product really is at a level someone who's not an engineer can understand. And the salespeople are treating their interactions with customers as transactions. And so those two things collide, and they bring down big companies and cost millions and millions of dollars in lost time and revenue. It's a big problem.
I have definitely seen it, felt it, experienced that.
Well, yeah. I would bring the relationship between sales and finance into that one. Right? We'll go out and get the deal, and then it's not my problem. I'm going to let finance figure out how to get the deal through the system. Anyway, but Brian, I want to go down that road of differences, because I want to get your perspective on people looking for similar people. Like, as a salesperson, I want to work with and I want to deal with a customer that is very similar to me. So I'll hunt that person down, and then we'll be buddies, we'll be friends, and we'll fish together, we'll golf together. So where does that seems to go against your point around we search for differences?
So that sounds pretty specific to certain types of industries. So you're going to go, fishing and golfing with someone. You're probably not in a B2C space. You're probably in a B2B space and looking at long-term contracts, right?
Sure.
I mean, you're not doing that to try to sell someone a $20 widget, right? Like, you're not going to take them fishing, right? That's so
most likely
or would
not,
you?
yeah.
I mean, Steve, I don't know you that well. Most likely not, right?
If
you're trying to sell someone your book.
Yeah. If the widget got me to $1 million deal, maybe. Yes.
Right. Exactly. So you're talking about investing in relationships. And now here's where I'm going to push back. And a lot of people do this. A lot of people are most comfortable hanging out around people just like them because we don't have to do any work. Right. I get this person. There's two problems with that. One is the job of sales is empathy, tactical empathy. The job of sales is not, would I buy this, but would they want this, right? Like, I don't need to be when I was a magician, I would have never paid for myself. I would have never bought what I was selling. I was doing high-end magic shows for exclusive events for like millionaires. Like, I was, getting $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to spend an hour in people's living rooms doing card tricks for 12 of their friends. I would have never paid $3,000 to have a magician in my house doing card tricks for an hour. And so a lot of people think, well, I need to be around people who are the same kind of person as me. But it's like, no, what you need to do is deeply understand who the people you're selling to want, what they need, what transformation are they looking for, and then make them feel heard, understood, and valued, and deliver a thing that serves them. Right? You don't need to be the same kind of person. Now you can, and a lot of people start selling or start a business to solve a problem that they themselves used to have. This is where most coaches are running a business, where most coaches are like, I had this problem 3 years ago. I figured it out. Now I'm going to sell to people who are just like I was 3 years ago. Right? And like, that makes sense. It's a good place to start. But if you want to level up in business, and especially level up in sales, I think people need to break this idea that I can only sell to people who are just like me. It's more work because you have to learn about other people. And that means we need to stop talking about ourselves, right?
Well, this might be a good segue into your book, right, on 3 new people. So is that where the missed opportunity is? Those 3 people aren't like me. You would go into a room, you would probably not speak to them on a normal circumstance. So is that where tell me a little bit more about your book and why the 3 new people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, so many folks are struggling to get a leg up in their careers or in their lives. I mean, my book wasn't specifically written for business people. It was about it was a manifesto on human connection. And it really started with this thing that you hear all the time, it's all who you know. You just hear it constantly. It's an excuse people use to put up, it's armor people use to justify why they don't have the things that they want in life, why they're not making the impact that they want. They go, well, it's all who you know, right? Now, privilege exists. Some people are born into wealthy families with connections and all that stuff. Undoubtedly, privilege exists. But you can't change what other people are doing, and you can't change the environment you were born into. You can only change your own habits, your own beliefs, your own actions. And so the idea is this: it's not who you know, it's who you meet. Every single person you currently know, at one point you didn't, including your parents, including your siblings. You know what I mean? Like, everyone you currently know, at some point you didn't. You had to meet them in some capacity. Your best friend, your best client. The problem is we don't engage at all. We walk through life just ignoring the people because we're busy. We're wrapped up in our own stuff. 2, when we do engage, we treat those interactions as transactions. I give you $3, you give me a cup of coffee, right? Unless you're at Starbucks, I give you $27, you give me a cup of coffee, right? Whatever. So like, end of transaction, no relationship necessary. That's how we tend to treat these things. And my point is, what if you actually treated each of these interactions in your life as an opportunity to make their life and your life better, all in that moment? Which means we need to get out of the mindset of what's in it for me, of I got my own stuff in my own head and I'm trying to get things out of the world. I'm trying to get something from the world. I'm trying to get something from every conversation. And we just treated each interaction as a relationship, as an opportunity to connect, as an opportunity to give a gift in and of itself. If we start with that mindset, everything gets easier, including sales.
Very interesting. Met the actor Mark Rylance a number of years ago, and what stuck with me is his comment back was around "be here now," and that's always stuck with me. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just be in the moment, be around the people that you are with, and savor that time. So, if you look at business executives, salespeople, and the missed opportunities, then. So you talked about the 3 people and the connections. Is there a communication gap, something that they're doing wrong in how they're communicating with people and or clients? Can you go down that path?
Yeah, there's all the problems. How much time do you have? Right. There are so many problems, but we can probably boil it down to this. So the question is, what are the biggest mistakes that communicators in the business sense are making? Is that really the question?
Yeah, pretty much, right?
Okay. All right. So
mistakes are where's the opportunity where they can do better or open things up? Yeah.
Yeah. Opportunities for folks in business to be better communicators. Okay. Here are the things we're doing wrong. Let's start there. We talk too much. We talk about ourselves, and we talk too much about ourselves. I mean, that's, if you could boil all of it down to that, because nobody cares about you. And I know that sounds like a terrible message, and I don't actually mean nobody cares about you. What I mean is, in the context of business communication, and mostly in the context of life, people care about themselves. That is our number one, the way that people walk around. Think about what we've been talking about. The reason we struggle to connect with others is because we're wrapped up in ourselves. So most people are doing the same thing. They're walking around struggling to connect with others and get what they want because they're too wrapped up in themselves. So if we want to actually change people, if we want, because that's ultimately the goal of selling. Like, there's so many people that think sales is this terrible thing, right? And it's like, we don't hate salespeople. First of all, most people think they hate salespeople. So, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but like, when people are surveyed, salespeople are one of the most hated people in any group. I think politicians is the only group that regularly comes in rated lower than salespeople in terms of like trustworthiness, right? So like, apart from politicians, we hate salespeople, except that's not really true. What people hate are con artists. What people hate are salespeople, people who are trying to sell them something that they don't want, they don't need, they can't afford, right? That's what people, and that's how we think about sales, because we've encountered that mostly. We mostly encounter salespeople as people who are trying to sell us something we don't want or don't need or can't afford. And if you've ever felt really terrible after buying something, like if you've ever, I don't know if either of you guys do timeshares, but if you've ever had somebody try to sell you a timeshare, right? That's what people think sales is, right? It's the psychological manipulation, influence, tactic, arm twisting, all of that stuff. What we love are salespeople who meet us where we are, deeply understand what we want, who we want to become, and offer us a product or a service that's going to get us there with confidence. We love those people. I don't know if you guys can see this beautiful blue amp behind me back here. Okay, this beautiful blue guitar amplifier that's behind me back here. That was an impulse purchase a few weeks ago. My brother was visiting from Seattle. He's a professional musician. I'm a musician, and we decided to go to Guitar Center together. And had no interest in buying anything. We were just looking for something to do. He's visiting to see my kid for a few days, and my kid's at daycare, and him and I are just jamming on some guitars. So I'm playing a guitar. I actually picked up a guitar for the purpose of checking out the guitar, but I had to plug into an amp. So I'm playing, and then I closed my eyes, and 20 minutes had gone by, and I was like, oh my God. I realized it was the amp was so magical. I was just digging this thing. And the sales guy in Guitar Center, who's known me for 8 years, I've bought, tens of thousands of dollars of stuff in there over the years. He walks up and he goes, hey man, thing sounds great. I said, it does sound great. He goes, you want me to box it up? I said, I do want you to box it up. And I bought it. That was it. Impulse buy. Came home with an amp. I walked in. My wife said, "How is guitar?" She asked the two of us, me and my brother, "How's Guitar Center?" I said, "It's great. I bought an amp," and she laughed. And I was like, "No, seriously, I bought an amp." And I had to bring it in. But the point is, I didn't hate that sales guy. I loved him because you know what he wasn't doing? He wasn't selling. He wasn't selling me something that I didn't want or didn't need or couldn't afford. He knew I could afford it because he had seen me in that store for 8 years walk out with stuff much more expensive than that. He knew I wanted it because I spent 20 minutes playing it. And the only thing he did was give me permission to do the thing I already wanted to do. I guarantee you, if he had never said, do you want me to box it up? I would not have bought it because I didn't actually need it. I wasn't in a buying mindset, but he showed up, met me where I was, saw me for who I was, understood deeply what I believed in, what I cared about from a relationship he had built up over time, and just gave me permission to do the thing that clearly I wanted to do. And I think that is one of the easiest ways to think about what sales actually is. It's giving people permission to do something that they already want to do, helping them get out of their own way. And the way that we do that is to stop talking about ourselves. Stop talking about our product, our service, how great we are, the awards that we've won, the amazing customers that we've had, how many sales we've made, and just meet people on their side of the conversation. What do you want? What do you believe? What do you fear? What do you need? What would help you get the thing? And then offer people the gift of connection, right? Being generous doesn't mean giving something away. Being generous sometimes means getting someone to pay a lot of money for something. But the generosity comes in the form of you seeing what they actually want and who they want to become and giving it to them, presenting it to them in a way that makes sense to them so they can do the thing they actually want to do.
I like that because I think it was in your TED Talk, and it was around understanding. So if you listen and truly understand that person, they would genuinely feel understood, and you can then take that relationship and conversation to a different level. Is that where you're going? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many times in sales we get in and we just instantly start telling them all about the product. Yeah. I mean, it's like, listen, every salesperson will tell you that they are customer centric. Every company will tell you that they are customer centric. Almost nobody is. They tell you that, they say it, we're customer centric, we're customer focused. And then you get into a meeting and they go, now before we talk, before we ask you a single question, here are 45 slides about us. Right? It's every time, right? They go, we're totally customer centric. Now listen to our story for 20 minutes. Here's how awesome our building is. Here's how awesome our founder is. Here's this product we have. Here's the sales that we made. Here's all the benefits. Here's all the features. Here's the thing. Here's the price. Blah, 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 blah. By the way, what questions do you have? The person is such an afterthought, right? Whereas what you really want to do is you want to get on. You want to go, so what's going on? Tell me what's on your plate. What's on your mind? and find out where they are. You cannot make a sale until somebody has articulated the problem they have or the desire they have out loud for themselves in their own words. If you have to tell somebody the problem they have, you lose.
I think that's such an important point that you make. And I hope our listeners just rewind the last 5 minutes and listen to that again, because I'm sitting here. There's just so much in there that is so important for our listeners to get. And part of the mission of this podcast for us is to change that stigma around salespeople, because there is an art to selling. There are techniques, there are ways that we communicate, there are ways we show up and serve that make that experience something that people really enjoy, or you can get it completely wrong and people hate you. And
Yeah, and you know, it's so funny that you said, I want to dig into that a little bit, where you said there's an art to selling. So there's two things. There's a science to communication, and there's an art to connection. And those two things combine, and that's where this gets really good. So there is a science to communication. There thousands of years, we know how people are moved. And it's not the way almost anybody in sales is operating. People are moved by story. People are moved by story. Story is what does it. Data doesn't do it. Rational arguments don't do it. None of that crap. All the stuff that is bogged down in those 45 slides. I met a company recently. Their slide deck has almost 300 slides in their sales presentation. I was like, I want to get this down to 10. And they were like, laughed at me. I'm like, no, like, I'm not kidding. Like, I want to get this down to 10. Like, there is no reason on planet Earth you should have that many slides. But that's the thing. There's a science to how people receive communication that moves them to action. And if you get the order wrong at all, it breaks. And most people not only get it wrong, but most people have no idea what it is in the first place. Like, in theory, if you're in sales, your job is to deeply understand the science and psychology of communication. But most people in sales don't know, have literally never done that. Learned on the job, like, got hired for a sales thing. They were like, here's the manual, here's the script, here's the product, here's the points, go sell. And so I don't blame salespeople for not knowing how to do it, because most of them weren't actually trained in it, and companies don't train in it. So first, there's a science to communication, which is largely built on storytelling. And then there's an art to connection, which is the stuff we've been talking about, which is how do you stay in the moment, stay on their side of the conversation, meet them where they're at, and take them on a journey of transformation in real time. So that's the art.
I love it. And I mean, we both love storytelling. And so let's segue straight into that. And obviously, with the success of your TEDx talk and your speaking career, you know how to tell a great story. So what do you think is the most important piece for salespeople to really focus in on when telling a story? Because I've been on calls with people where I hear the story and I go, oh my God, I gave up after 2 minutes. I'm sure the client gave up. This has been going on for 5 minutes, and it didn't land. So how do you land the plane with a good story that really helps you sell?
Great question. I love this, Dan. So there are two kinds of stories. There's a story you tell, and there's a story you weave. And I'm going to take those in that order, because most people understand the first one. They know what it is. They don't understand how to do it. But very few people even know about the second one, which is a story you weave. So we're going to come to that because it's actually more important. Let's start with the story you tell. Story you tell is a literal story that you actually tell in a conversation. And there are tons of frameworks for story. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of frameworks. They can get super nuanced and complicated. But let's just start with the most basic, the most important, which is a 3-act structure. If you only learn this, your storytelling will get 90%. You'll be better than 90% of all storytellers if you only learn this. And this is going to sound so easy, and it's because it's so easy that nobody does it. All right, 3-act structure for storytelling: before, transformation, after. That's it. The only three things that are necessary components for a story to be a story are before, transformation, after. If you don't have all three of those, you don't have a story. You might have a joke or a one-liner or a limerick or a riddle, an anecdote, but you don't have a story. So what do I mean by before, transformation, after? Okay, before. What was going on in your life or in the character's life or in the character's journey, however you're telling? It could be a story about you, a story about someone else. What was going on in the character's life before things changed? That's before. In other words, before is the context. Okay, you can think of this with comedians. That's the setup. The setup is usually not very funny. They have to get necessary context out there before they get to the punchline, right? That's the setup. Okay, so before, what was going on for the character before things changed? Transformation. What changed? Simple as that. What changed? After, how are things different or better after the transformation, after things changed, right? Which is the result or the impact. So you have context, transformation, impact, or before, transformation, after, if you want to think of it that way. This sounds so basic that your listeners are rolling their eyes, and I promise you, dear listener, pay attention to what I'm about to say. This will transform your sales conversations. Okay, so here's an example of a story. I was hungry, so I ate an apple, and now I feel better. It's not a great story, but it is a story. In other words, you can tell a story in one sentence. Stories do not need to be, and often should not be, long or drawn out. Too many people think what storytelling is the wind bristled the short hairs on my ankle as the sweet smell of cinnamon wafted through the cottage. God damn, stop. Everybody stop doing that. That is not that. No one here is trying to write the next of Mice and Men. We are having sales conversations. We're trying to connect with people on a deeply human level. So we're not doing literary work. There's so many people who think that's what storytelling is. Don't do that. Before, transformation, after. So what you want to do is, in the context of a sales conversation, you want to have at least one or two stories that can be told in 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes at absolute maximum. 30 seconds to a minute is plenty, that make a point about the thing that you are offering. And story is just a vehicle. So you can use a story for lots of different parts of the sales conversation. You can use a story for education to get somebody to understand why they would even be interested in your product if they're in that part of the sales cycle where they're not even aware that they have a problem. You can use a story to make them aware that they have the problem that you solve. You can use a story to overcome an obstacle or an objection. Somebody is like, yeah, but I don't really have time, or I don't have the money, or what are the three objections everybody has? Time, money, I don't actually think this is going to work, whatever. So you can use a story about a similar client or customer to them that felt like that, went through the program and ended up transforming as a result and got great things, right? You can use stories like that. You can tell founder stories. If you're the owner of a company, you can tell a story if you're trying to get buy-in from investors or sponsors. A founder can tell the story of how the company came to be. The story itself is a vehicle. It's not the point in and of itself, right? My friend Francisco Mafuz, who is a storytelling expert, that's all he does, out of Barcelona. I should connect him with you guys. You'd love to have him on the show. He runs the Story Powers podcast. He says this, it's the best. He says, a story is simply a real life example that makes a point. That's it. It's a real life example that makes a point. So you described that person who's just going on and telling a story, and you're like, I'm bored, I'm checked out. What is this? Where it's because you can't tell what the point is. So either tell a short story in 30 seconds and get to the point, or make sure the point is more obvious as you get into the story. So either tell them what you're going to tell them, or do a short story and then tell them why you just told them that. So that's a story you tell.
That's so impactful, because you just brought me back to every presentation that I've done. And I didn't realize it, but I had exactly that in the presentation. So I was selling high ticket technology, and I can remember going, there's 4 or 5 main objections that I know every single buyer has.
Yeah.
So I would go through stories about people who had that same objection.
Yep.
And here's what happened to them. They went through this transformation once they bought. And here's what they said on the other side. So I gave them the before, I gave them the transformation, and then so they could paint a picture of, okay, that's me. I feel the way that you're telling me they felt, and that's my main thing. I want to be that person on the other side.
That's right, because a story is about transformation. All stories are about transformation. It's about somebody who was one way and became a different way by the end. And that is the number one thing that you're actually selling. We are not actually selling whatever the product or program or service or widget is. What people buy when they swipe their credit card or put down cash, whether they're buying an $8 USB cable or they're buying an $8,000 coaching program, they are buying a personal transformation. They're in their head, they're going, I'm going to be a different kind of person on the other side of this. And I mean that really seriously. Like, even when they're buying a USB cable, they're going, I'm going to be the kind of person that doesn't lose my USB cables anymore. Or I'm going to be the kind of person that can always find one of these. So I'm going to buy 5 more because I can never find one. Even at that level, there's a transformation they're looking for, right? I'm going to be the kind of person who never has a dead cell phone, right? That you're always selling a transformation. And so a story is just primed for that in a way that data, bullet points, facts are not. Right. And so that's why story is so useful. And I'll give you a really good example here on how people get stories wrong so often, and why, if you've ever been at a networking event, or you've been at a social gathering, a party, and someone's just talking your ear off, telling you a story, and you just start to feel that, like, oh man, is there, like, oh, hey, there's my friend Guacamole. I'm going over there. Bye. Sorry. Like, you just got to get out. Like, this is why that happens. It's because of this. People miss one of the parts of the story. Most people tell a story and only tell you the transformation. They tell you the pow. In other words, people tell a story like this. They go, oh my God, today I was on the plane to come here, and the pilot said something was broken, and we sat on the tarmac for 2 hours. That's how people tell stories. That's only Why isn't that interesting? Because, I mean, you might go, oh, that happened to me once, and then you go back to your life, right? Like, there's nothing interesting about that because there is no transformation. It's only the pow moment. It's only the actual moment where something changed. But there's no context because they forgot to tell you the before. So imagine if that same person said to you, so I've been estranged from my son for 20 years. And we haven't spoken a word, since he was a teenager. And he called me up out of the blue a few weeks ago. And he said, Dad, I'm getting married and I want you to be there. I want to fix this. And so I got on a plane, and the pilot said, it's going to be a 2-hour delay. Now, can you already feel how different this is, right? Because what are you thinking right now? You're thinking, what happened? What happened next? Now, that's just adding the context. You could, by the way, you know that I'm making this up and you still felt something as I said that. That's how powerful story is, right? Okay, before transformation, after what resulted. If I go, estranged from my son for 20 years, got on the plane, we sat for 2 hours on the tarmac, so I missed my layover, right? I don't even have to finish a story. You go, right? You know right away, as soon as I go, I missed my layover, you know that this is a terrible ending, right? And so I missed the wedding, whatever. Now, that is how story works in a nutshell. And that even a made up story can grab people emotionally if you get the 3 components right. Imagine if you weren't making up the story and you were actually using stories in your conversations, how much more powerful it would be.
That's amazing. And I'm sure that you've got tons and tons of stories that you've developed. And I like how you distinguish between telling them and weaving them.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite short story that illustrates a point that you could say, okay, here's an example, that works for me, and it follows that sequence you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I tell you that example, let me at least just say, so what a story you weave as opposed to a story you tell, because we haven't actually talked about that. A story you weave is how you invite someone into a story that they get to live in, as opposed to telling a story about someone or something else. So the most powerful, this is like if you want to level all the way up in sales and in business, you start weaving stories instead of telling them. Not instead of, in addition to telling them. So what you really want to do is not just tell someone a story about a transformation someone else had so they can relate to it. That's great. You want to invite them into a story where they feel like they're the character going on the transformation to become a different kind of person, which means you need to understand the hero's journey, which is a buzzword that everyone in sales today knows. And I can guarantee you 9 out of 10 salespeople, I say, have you heard of the hero's journey? They go, yes. I go, can you explain it to me? They go, no. People don't actually know what it is, right? And it is essentially the 3,000-year-old story structure that works every time. Pixar has mastered it. If you ever want to really see it in action, at one point, I Googled the top 30 grossing, the top 30 highest grossing films of all time adjusted for inflation, because I was curious how many of them had a hero's journey in them. I was expecting about half. I was thinking if there's half, it'll make my point. I could use that as a data point in my next presentation, right? As an example, it was all 30. It was all 30. If you don't understand the hero's journey, you don't understand people. You don't understand how to move people to action. And so essentially the hero's journey is this in a nutshell. There is somebody, a character, who is in a status quo. They're living their life, things are fine. But then something changes. They realize they want something, right? And so they leave their ordinary universe. They leave their status quo on a quest. This often is them literally leaving the village, leaving the Shire, heading out, leaving Tatooine, right? It's often literally, but it doesn't have to be. It could be metaphorically leaving their comfort zone. They leave to go figure out how to get the thing they want. But they can't just get it or we don't have a story. They encounter obstacles along the way. There's things in their way, and they realize they're not strong enough to get the thing they want. They don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the strength. So somewhere around the midpoint, they meet a mentor figure or a guide, a Yoda, a Mary Poppins, a Mr. Miyagi, who's going to help them learn the skills, become the person who knows how to solve that problem, and then nudge them back to the world from whence they came, where with their new skills, they can slay the dragon, get the thing they want, become the hero, save the day, which is the ultimate transformation, and then the movie's over, or the book is over. And the sequel picks up there, and they go through it again, which is why you can imagine this as a story circle as opposed to a linear thing. What's really important to understand about a story you weave is that you are not the hero of the story. Most people in sales present themselves as the hero without even realizing it. They're like, our product is amazing. We have all these sales. Customers love it. We've won awards. That's hero talk. And the problem is the person on the other side of your sales conversation, they see themselves as a hero. They're trying to become a hero in their own life. They're trying to win the day, solve a problem, become stronger. And you can't have two heroes in the same story. We know what that looks like. They made that movie. It's called Captain America Civil War, and we know what that looks like, right? Now, they made a movie about it on purpose, but it was the two lead characters, Iron Man and Captain America, fighting it out to the death, even though they were both good guys the whole movie. Two heroes in the same story don't work. They clash. What a hero is looking for is a mentor figure, someone to help them become the hero of their own life. And so in sales, we weave a story when we invite someone in to a story where they are the hero. They go on a journey of transformation, and we simply act as a guide or a mentor figure on the route there. So that's like next level, but that's where you want to go. Before I tell you an example of a story, did that make sense conceptually?
It does, because it comes right back to and we've seen it so many times, the companies and the presentations that start with everything about who they are and their factory in New Jersey, and they're telling their story, and nothing about the client and nothing about understanding who they are. And they haven't positioned themselves as the guide. They've just done 20 minutes of hero talk.
Totally. And if your listeners are looking for a resource, I mean, the most modern popular version of this is Story Brand by Donald Miller. I'm a Business Made Simple certified coach, so I'm actually certified to coach people through Story Brand. But like, there's a lot of people that have talked about this for decades. Don made it really popular and really sleek and sexy, so it's a great place to start. The book's like $12. I don't get anything if you go buy it. Building a story brand. If you want to just understand that, it's a good place to start. But yeah. So do you want it? Oh, do you have it there somewhere behind you?
I think it's on my shelf here somewhere. I have it. I own it.
It's got to be.
It?
Everyone in sales should own it.
I'm impressed.
I'm sure it's there somewhere. You probably replaced it with the sweet tarts.
It's an amazing book. It really makes you rethink how we position things. So
yeah. So your question was an example of an actual story where I could like do it. You want to hear an example of like me telling a real story with a point, the way I might do it in a conversation?
Yeah, lead us into how you would do it, because I think it's one thing to hear it and have an understanding of what it is, and then to see it in action is always a different thing.
Yeah, so totally. So I'll do a meta example. So I'll kind of stay on the topic of the conversation and tell you a story that makes sense in the context of this conversation. So when I was a young magician, for your listeners, I was a full-time professional magician for 10 years, started off as a, doing backyard barbecues, card tricks for people in flip-flops and, jumping in and out of their pool, and built my way up to touring the world as a magician. So I went on that whole journey. But when I was a young magician, I was really struggling and I was so frustrated. I remember this day vividly. I said to my mentor, this guy who was a veteran magician I really looked up to, a guy had been in the industry for 40, 50 years. And I was just complaining to him nonstop. And I was like, man, I'm not, I'm not getting the applause that I want on the tricks. People aren't laughing. I'm not getting the laughter I want on the jokes. I'm not getting enough gigs. Like, what the hell? I was just complaining. And he stopped me cold and he goes, Brian, can't you hear the problem? It's right there in your language. You're trying to get something from everyone. You're trying to get applause. You're trying to get laughter. You're trying to get gigs, get clients. What if, he goes, this is going to sound so dumb. He goes, but what if instead you showed up to give? You showed up to give your audience a break from their 9 to 5, their dreary 9 to 5, so they'd have something to clap about. You showed up to say something that was so funny it would give them release from all the tension and the stress that they had in their lives, and they would just burst out laughing. You showed up to give your prospects such an incredible experience that you were offering them that they would feel stupid saying no to that because it would solve all the problems that they have at their event. What if you simply showed up to give instead of trying to get something from everyone? And I started doing that. I redesigned my whole show. I redesigned my sales process and my marketing, got myself completely out of it. And as soon as I did that, people started laughing in the aisles. They started applauding. I got my first standing ovation, like legit unprompted standing ovation. Clients came in through the roof, and I took myself from struggling magician to regional to nationally touring in the span of 2 years. And the reason I tell people that story is the shift from what can I get, in other words, transactional, to what can I give, which is a gift, which is generosity. That shift seems simple, but it's not. It's very difficult to do, and it's incredibly powerful if you can do it. So that's how I would actually tell a story and make a point all in the span of like a minute and a half.
Love the story, Brian. It a few years ago too, I learned from a sales training company. But I before I could get anything, I'm right in your wheelhouse here. I had to show up with something to offer up to my clients before I started to ask for anything or try to look at any type of business. I had to show up with something that they would have some value in, that might not even talk to what I was selling, but had some value to their business, or to your point, trying to create help them be their hero in their own space and their own place. So I love that piece.
Yeah.
So, but I'm gonna bring it back to like simplicity here. I'm the salesperson out on the road, going to make my next sales call, or I'm going to have to dial up that VP of finance and start the conversation. So is there a power question that you can help that salesperson on that next call, either asking their customer or asking themselves on what they could do differently, or to your point around communication or being a better communicator?
Yeah, so a question that's like a magic question that if you just ask this question, all of your sales problems will go away. Yeah, okay. So
the magic bullet,
I'll give you some you're right, the magic bullet. So we all know there are no actual magic bullets, but
That's
there
correct.
are better questions and there are worse questions and there are questions that lead people the wrong. Like, for example, never use the word why in a question if you can avoid it. Why makes people feel defensive immediately. When you say why, people, what they hear is, I need to justify what I just said, or I need to justify my position. So you can use it strategically if you want someone to justify something, but avoid the word why. And, so instead of asking like, well, why do you want this thing, or why do you want that, or why do you want to do that, or why did you do that? All of those feel like a challenge and people shut down. They throw walls up when you do that. Instead of asking why, like, I don't know, why, so why are you here today? Right? People have to justify it. You can say, what are you hoping to accomplish today? It's just a better phrasing. It's a softer phrase. But if you're looking for a real magic question, there's a few things. Here's a question to get you started. So what are we doing here? What's on your mind? What's on your mind is one of the easiest questions to get people to immediately tell you why they're there. Because on a sales conversation, the very first thing that, now this is if somebody made the call with you, right? Not if you're doing outreach. If you're doing outreach, you can't go, hey, what's on your mind, right? That doesn't work, right? Totally different approach. But assuming that most people are jumping on a call with you because they're already interested in some way in something that you have, what's on your mind is a great place to start. But honestly, the questions you ask them are a whole lot less important than the questions you need to ask yourself before you get on the call. And here's some questions you need to ask yourself. First, and this is a trifecta, what do you do? Who is it for? And why does it matter? And I'm using the word why on purpose here because I want you to get defensive and justify it. What do you do? Who is it for? Why does it matter? And then can you express that in one sentence? I call this a core message or a filter statement. And the reason I call it a filter statement is because if you can get those three things, what do you do? Who is it for? Why does it matter? Into one sentence, then you know exactly what you're there to do. You know exactly who you should be talking to, how you should be talking to them. You know what marketing avenues to pursue, the tactics, all that stuff become a lot easier because you have a filter. Because if anything you're about to do or say does not immediately and obviously support that one sentence, it shouldn't be in your conversation. It shouldn't be on your marketing. It shouldn't be in your mind, right? So that's the first thing. Can you get what do you do, who is it for, and why does it matter into one sentence? And a formula for you, because everyone wants a formula. Okay, great. How do I do it? Here's the formula. I'll give it to you. For audience, to action, so that impact. For audience, to action, so that impact. In other words, who is it for? That's the audience, right? I help X. I teach X. I work with X. And not just I work with, I don't know. Give me an example. Who do you work with? Who do you usually sell to? Steve.
Let's say small business owners.
Right. Okay. So that's fine. That's good. That's specific. Small business owners. You can get more specific because you can go into psychographics. Are they busy business owners? Are they stressed out business owners? Are they parent business owners? Are they what kind of small business owners are they? You can get even more specific. The more specific you get, the more people feel understood, right? So you can have audience, get as specific as possible. So that's your who is it for, right? For audience, to action. What are they going to do as a result of working with you? What are they going to do as a result of buying from you, working with you, colliding with you, right? Action. So that impact. What is the result of this? And by the way, if you've noticed, that's actually a story, what we talked about earlier. You actually get all the elements of a story into this sentence if you do it right, which is why I led earlier with you can do a story in one sentence. And this is a story that it has the structure of a story. It doesn't sound like a story. And that's the most beautiful thing is if you have a story structure, even if it's not a real story, it hits the brain just like a story does. So for audience to action, so that impact. If you do that, ask yourself those questions, you will deeply understand the kind of work you do and the kind of conversations you should be having a lot more. And then the questions will come a lot more naturally when you get into them.
Nice. Is there, just to go one step further on that interaction, everything is now like we're on this, connection. We're hooked up by video. More and more salespeople are having to do that, right? Not so much in person. So is there a difference there, or is there something extra that you need to do if you're on video or on, Teams or Zoom?
Yeah, don't use Teams. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have so many. Every time a company only uses Teams, and so I have to use that, for some reason, my brain doesn't work with that user interface. But I know it works for a lot of people. That's a joke. That's a joke, Microsoft. Don't sue me. Okay, the question really was, is there something fundamentally different about being in a virtual space connecting with people as opposed to being in the real world? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, it's not as easy as it looks, right?
No. Okay, so I think there's two ways to approach this. One is that the most important thing about virtual communication like this is that it is broadcast. It is not an actual conversation. You need to recognize that. And the reason is that at least in the current state of technology, we can't talk over each other, right? You know what happens. If we both try to talk at the same time, what happens? You can't hear them. They can't hear you. The audio blips out of existence. My friend calls it the Zoom Thanos snap. It's like Thanos blips our audio out of existence when we both try to talk at the same time, right? So what that means is virtual communication is broadcast. I talk, you listen, then you talk, I listen, which is actually not how in-person conversations go, because the way that we feel deeply connected in the real world is often when we start cutting each other off because we're excited and we tag on something somebody just said, and there's this energy that you can feel that goes back and forth. That is, I think, the primary reason that people don't feel like they have as much connection in virtual spaces is because they lack the ability to bounce back and forth. And similarly, because it's broadcast, it means we have to be much more intentional about making people feel heard, understood, and valued. Because if, like, say right now, even just three of us, one of us can talk at a time, two of us are listening, which means if we're in a room of people where there's some introverts, and by the way, introverts make up about 50% of the population, introverts will get smashed online. They will not be able to get a word in edgewise because only one person can talk at a time. And so the loudest, most aggressive people are going to be the ones commanding the mic. And I would see this. I worked with the companies for the whole first 2 years of COVID on this. If they have 30 people, 40 people on Zoom, it looks like, hey, we're all together. But it feels like one person commands the entire space and everyone else has to shut up. Like literally, we can turn your voice off by hitting the mute button, right? So it doesn't mean we can't connect. It means we need to be aware of the limitations of each medium. There are strengths and weaknesses to each medium. The strength of this medium is that it's a level playing field in terms of everybody gets a front row seat. Everybody looks the same. We all have a box that is exactly the same size. So we can actually, nobody can like just charge up into the front of the room, right? Like people being obnoxious, we can kick them out. So it's actually a fairly level playing field. But if you're leading a space in the virtual environment, you need to go out of your way to make sure each voice has a chance to be heard. And so that's the twist to that. There's a whole bunch of tactics that you can use to make things a little bit easier on virtual spaces to connect with people. First of all, you can leverage front to back dynamic. One of the problems with being in the virtual space is you're limited by this very small box. There's nowhere to go. So you feel very static. Like you can't be as dynamic of a speaker as a communicator. But people don't realize they can leverage back to front. So I can lean back if I want to have a more casual environment and more casual feel. I can come straight up and get closer to the, I can come right up here if I really want you to pay attention to what I'm saying. You can't do that to people in the real world, so we can leverage that here. Similarly, tactic, deeply understand how microphones work. The microphone is so much more important than the camera. Like, camera is nowhere as important as your voice. Your voice, the better the sound, the fuller the sound, the clearer the sound, the more people will feel connected with you. And then you can leverage it, because if you want to come in real close to a microphone and talk a little bit quieter, it feels intimate. It feels much more personal. Or I can get a little bit further away, talk a little bit louder. We feel just like we're having a conversation sitting across the table from each other. So being dynamic with your body and with the microphone gives you a chance to connect with people with intention as well. And you can set up your camera at eye level and do a bunch of other things. But those are the main points.
Very good. I've learned a lot, and I'll lean in here, Dan. Dan and I are learning how to learning how to not speak on top of each other. So we're catching on to this dynamic.
Yeah, what you guys are doing, by the way, co-hosting a podcast that is all virtual is very difficult. It's very hard to figure out which of the two of you should be talking next, who's going to take that, not talk over each other. It's actually so much harder to do than it looks like, because I've been on both sides of it. I've co-hosted a podcast, and it's very difficult to do. So kudos.
Thanks.
Well, it has been amazing having
you. See, so what? Dan?
That was awesome. That was great. We planned that. That was totally planned.
Steve, go ahead. I'll give you one last chance. You good?
No, it's over to you. This is fun. I'm learning a lot from Brian.
Me too. And the best part is, Brian, we can edit.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is our first episode on human connection, and I think you made a great connection today. And one of the big takeaways I just want to highlight at the end, because I hadn't heard it before, not put this way. It wasn't what I expected, but it's not who you know, it's who you meet. I just want to put an exclamation point on that, because that was a big takeaway for me. So
great.
I want to thank Brian Miller for spending time with us today and dropping some magic on the mic for our listeners. He's captivated and connected with us today, and he's proved that he is somebody that can help us here in the lab solve the sales problem. The answer, if you missed it, is to create human connection. And just say the damn thing. Get clear on your message. Get clear on who you are, what your business is, what you're selling, and you're going to grow. So, Brian, how can our audience members find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Great. Thank you, Dan and Steve. It's been such a pleasure. Yeah, you can go to LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active, most publicly. Look up Brian Miller Speaks on LinkedIn. But a lot of folks in your audience are thinking about building thought leadership. They want to be thought leaders. They want to not just sell, but actually have a platform where people come to them, listen to them, view them as an authority in their area. And so if you want, you can go to earnrespectgetpaid.com. earnrespectgetpaid.com. And that's where we have our free video course on 5 ways to become a thought leader in 2023. So earnrespectgetpaid.com, toss your email in, and you get the free video course.
So all of our listeners, go there and also go watch Brian's TED Talk, be part of the millions of people who have watched it. This has been the Sales Problem Podcast. So please remember to follow us, share with your friends, subscribe. And if you've got any feedback, please email us at thesalesproblempodcast@gmail.com. And remember, the more you know, the more you're going to grow. And we are here to help you get the growth you need to thrive and succeed. We are the Great Canadian Growth Guys, and we're helping get you answers to solve the sales problem. So keep tuning in, keep growing your business, growing yourself, and growing your sales. And I'm going to give a shout out to our sponsor, not actually our sponsor, but the sponsor we want, Sweet Tarts, because I am sweet and Steve is tart, and we're going to manifest them sponsoring the podcast. If anybody's listening, still listening at the end, and you know somebody from the Sweet Tart conglomerate, send them our way. Thanks for listening.